Those medals belonged to my husband who died serving this country. I stood there trembling as my daughter-in-law laughed in my face. But what I discovered next, and the call I received from a stranger, would bring her entire world crashing down. I'm grateful you're here. Stay with me until the end, and comment which state you're watching from so I can see how far this story reaches. I never imagined that at 73 years old, I'd be fighting my own family to protect my husband's memory. But here I was, standing in what used to be my living room, staring at an empty wall where something precious had once hung, feeling my entire world collapse around me. Let me start from the beginning, because you need to understand how I got here. My name is Eleanor Whitfield, and I've lived in Maplewood Heights, Oregon for 47 years. My husband, Theodore, everyone called him Theo, passed away 2 years ago last March. 45 years of marriage. 3 tours of duty in Iraq and Afghanistan. A Silver Star for valor, 2 Bronze Stars for meritorious service, and a Purple Heart that he earned when an IED tore through his convoy outside Kandahar, leaving him with shrapnel scars that covered his left leg and torso. Those medals sat in a hand-carved mahogany display case in our living room. Theo had made the case himself in our garage, spending weeks sanding and staining the wood until it gleamed. He wasn't a man who talked much about his service. The nightmares, the jumpiness at loud noises, the way he'd sometimes stare into space for minutes at a time, those told the story his words never could. But on Veterans Day and Memorial Day, he'd put on his dress uniform, pin those medals to his chest, and stand a little straighter. Those medals weren't just metal and ribbon to him. They were proof that his sacrifice had meant something. After Theo died, I thought I'd live in our house forever. It was a modest 3-bedroom ranch-style home on Oakwood Drive, nothing fancy, but it was ours. Every room held memories: the kitchen where we'd cooked Sunday dinners together, the bedroom where we'd held each other through Theo's worst nightmares, the back porch where we'd watched sunsets and planned our retirement years that never came. My son, Garrett, had been supportive after Theo's death. At first, he'd come by weekly, help with yard work, take me to doctor's appointments. I thought we were close. I thought he understood what this house, what those medals, meant to me. Then he married Sienna. Sienna Ashford, now Sienna Whitfield, was everything I wasn't. At 32, she was tall, blonde, perpetually tanned, with a smile that belonged on a toothpaste commercial and a wardrobe that probably cost more than my car. She worked in real estate, drove a white Mercedes, and had the kind of confidence that came from never having struggled for anything in her life. Garrett met her at a corporate networking event 2.5 years ago. They were married within 8 months, a lavish ceremony at the Riverside Country Club that I'm fairly certain Sienna's parents paid for, though no one ever said so directly. I tried to like her. I really did. But from the first time she walked into my home, I could see her mentally calculating square footage and property values. "This neighborhood has really appreciated," she'd said during that first visit, walking through my living room like she was conducting an appraisal. "Some of these homes are selling for $800,000–900,000 now. Can you believe that? Houses that were worth nothing 30 years ago. Theo and I had bought this house in 1978 for $73,000. It had been a stretch then, with Theo's military salary and my part-time work as a school secretary. Now, apparently, it was a gold mine. The pressure started subtle. Little comments here and there. "Mom, when was the last time you had the roof inspected?" Garrett would ask. "These old houses need constant maintenance." "Eleanor, you really should think about downsizing," Sienna would add, her voice dripping with false concern. "All these stairs can't be good for your knees. And the yard work, it's just too much for someone your age." Someone my age. I was 73, not 93. I still drove, still did my own shopping, still maintained my garden. My knees ached sometimes, sure, and I moved slower than I used to, but I wasn't helpless. I wasn't ready to be put out to pasture. But they kept at it. Every visit, every phone call, the same concerns repeated like a mantra. The house is too big. The maintenance is too expensive. You're all alone. What if something happens? 6 months after their wedding, they really ramped up the campaign. It was a Sunday afternoon in September when Garrett and Sienna showed up unannounced. I'd been weeding the garden, wearing my old jeans and one of Theo's flannel shirts that still smelled faintly like him if I buried my nose in the collar. "Mom, we need to talk," Garrett said, guiding me to the kitchen table like I was a child who needed to be sat down for a serious conversation. Sienna placed a glossy brochure on the table in front of me. Silver Pines Retirement Community, the cover read, showing impossibly happy seniors playing shuffleboard and doing watercolor paintings. "We think this might be perfect for you," Sienna said, her voice bright with enthusiasm. "It's in Cedarbrook, only 20 minutes from here. Independent living with optional support services. They have a wonderful activities calendar, movie nights, book clubs, exercise classes." I stared at the brochure, feeling something cold and heavy settle in my chest. "You want to put me in a nursing home?" "It's not a nursing home, Mom," Garrett said quickly. "It's independent living. You'd have your own apartment, your own space. But there'd be people around, security, medical staff on call if you need them." "I don't need them." "Not now," Sienna interjected. "But Mom," she'd started calling me Mom a month after the wedding, though it always sounded rehearsed, "you have to think ahead. What if you fall? What if you have a medical emergency in the middle of the night? No one would know for hours, maybe days. I have neighbors. I have friends who check on me." "Dorothy Bramwell?" Garrett asked. "Mom, she's 81. And the Johnsons moved to Florida last year. Who else is there?" He had a point, but I wasn't about to admit it. "I'm not moving into a senior facility. This is my home." "A home you can barely afford," Sienna said, and for the first time, I heard an edge in her voice. "The property taxes alone are crushing you. Garrett told me you've been dipping into savings just to cover the bills." I looked at my son, betrayed. Those were private conversations we'd had, worries I'd shared with him in confidence. He had the grace to look uncomfortable. "Mom, it's the truth. You're on a fixed income, Social Security and Theo's military pension. That's less than $3,000 a month. Your property taxes are almost $12,000 a year. The house needs repairs you can't afford. The furnace is 20 years old. The roof needs replacing. How are you going to pay for that?" "I'll figure it out." "You can't figure it out," Sienna said flatly. "You're hemorrhaging money maintaining a house that's way too big for you. The smart thing, the responsible thing, would be to sell it while the market is hot, move somewhere appropriate for your stage of life, and bank the proceeds for your future care needs." Stage of life. Future care needs. She talked about my existence like I was a problem to be solved, a burden to be efficiently managed. "I'm not selling this house," I said, standing up. "This is where Theo and I built our life. This is where we raised Garrett. Every room has memories. I'm not giving that up to play bingo in some sterile facility." "Mom, please," Garrett started, but I held up my hand. "I appreciate your concern. Both of you. But this is my decision to make, and I've made it. I'm staying." They left shortly after that, but I could see the frustration on their faces. This wasn't over. The next few months, they tried different tactics. Articles left on my counter about senior safety. Statistics about elderly falls and hip fractures. Garrett started calling every day, sometimes twice a day, always with the same questions. "How are you feeling? Did you take your medications? Are you eating properly? Have you thought more about Silver Pines?" Then, in January, I fell. It was stupid, really. I'd been changing a light bulb in the hallway, standing on a step stool that had been perfectly stable for 20 years. But my foot slipped, and I went down hard, landing on my hip. The pain was immediate and breathtaking. I managed to crawl to the phone and call Garrett. He and Sienna arrived within 15 minutes, finding me on the floor, bruised and shaken but not seriously injured. Garrett wanted to call an ambulance. I refused. Sienna wanted to take me to the emergency room. I refused that too. Finally, we compromised on urgent care, where an X-ray showed severe bruising but no fracture. You were lucky this time, the doctor said. But at your age, a fall like this could have broken your hip, your pelvis, your spine. You need to be more careful. She needs to be somewhere safer, Sienna added before I could respond. Somewhere with grab bars and emergency call buttons. The doctor, a young woman who couldn't have been more than 40, nodded sympathetically. There are excellent senior living facilities that can provide that kind of support while still maintaining independence. I left urgent care with a prescription for pain medication and a deep sense of dread. The campaign intensified after that. Garrett started showing up unannounced, letting himself in with the spare key I'd given him years ago, checking on me like I was a flight risk. Sienna began forwarding emails about senior housing options, not just Silver Pines, but facilities in Portland, Eugene, even Seattle. Each one came with notes like, "This one has a great crafts program," or "Look at these wonderful amenities." I was drowning in their concern, suffocating under the weight of their helpful suggestions. And the worst part was, I was starting to doubt myself. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was being stubborn and foolish. Maybe this house was too much for me to handle alone. In March, 2 weeks before the second anniversary of Theo's death, Garrett and Sienna staged what I later realized was an intervention. They arrived on a Saturday morning with coffee and pastries from my favorite bakery, a tactical choice, I realized later. Sienna was wearing a soft pink sweater and minimal makeup, looking as non-threatening as possible. Garrett had that serious expression he'd worn since he was a little boy when he was trying to convince me to let him do something I'd initially said no to. "Mom, we've scheduled a tour at Silver Pines for you," Garrett said, sliding a brochure across my kitchen table. "Tomorrow at 2 o'clock. We'll go with you, just to look around. No pressure." "I already told you, just look," Sienna interrupted gently. "That's all we're asking. Just see the place before you make up your mind. If you hate it, fine. We'll drop it. But you owe it to yourself to at least consider other options." I wanted to refuse. I wanted to stand firm and tell them to stop trying to manage my life. But I was tired. So tired of fighting, of defending myself, of justifying my desire to stay in my own home. And maybe, a small part of me wondered if they had a point. Maybe I was being unreasonable. Maybe I was making everyone's life harder, including my own, by clinging to this house. "Fine," I said. "I'll look. But I'm not promising anything." Silver Pines retirement community was exactly what I expected. Immaculate landscaping. Fresh paint. A lobby that looked like a hotel. Staff members who smiled too brightly and spoke just a little too loudly, the way people do when they think you might be hard of hearing. The tour director, a woman named Patricia with helmet-like silver hair and a navy pantsuit, walked us through the facilities with practiced enthusiasm. The dining room with its varied menu options. The activity center with its scheduled programs. The fitness room with its senior-appropriate equipment. The library, the craft room, the putting green, the garden areas. "And here's a model apartment," Patricia said, opening a door to reveal a space roughly the size of my current living room. 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, a small kitchenette, and a living area. It was clean and bright, with large windows and neutral carpeting. It was also completely impersonal, like a doctor's waiting room pretending to be a home. "What do you think, Mom?" Garrett asked hopefully. I thought I would rather die than spend my final years in a beige box playing cards with strangers and eating institutional food from a cafeteria. But I saw the hope in his eyes, the relief on Sienna's face, and I found myself nodding. "It's nice," I lied. "There's actually a unit available right now," Patricia jumped in. "Second floor, beautiful view of the garden. And we're running a special promotion this month. Waived application fee if you move in within 30 days. "That's perfect timing," Sienna said quickly. "Eleanor, this could be a sign." "What do you think?" What I thought was that I was being herded like cattle toward a decision I didn't want to make. But I was outnumbered and exhausted. "Can I think about it?" "Of course," Patricia said warmly. But these units do go quickly. I'd hate for you to miss this opportunity. On the drive home, Garrett and Sienna were jubilant. They'd already started making plans, talking about moving timelines, discussing which furniture would fit in the apartment, speculating about how much my house would sell for. The market is incredible right now, Sienna was saying from the front seat. Houses in Maplewood Heights are getting multiple offers within days. We could probably list it for $850, maybe even $900,000, depending on condition. We're not listing it, I said from the back seat. Well, not immediately, Sienna corrected smoothly. But once you're settled at Silver Pines, there's no point in keeping it. The property taxes alone would eat through your savings. Better to sell while the market's strong, invest the proceeds, and use that income to cover your living expenses. They had it all figured out. My entire future, planned and packaged like a real estate transaction. 2 weeks later, on the day that marked 2 years since Theo's death, I signed the papers to move into Silver Pines. I told myself it was just a trial. 3 months, I specified in writing. If I didn't like it, I could move back home. Of course, Mom, Garrett said, hugging me. Whatever you want. But I saw the look that passed between him and Sienna, and something in my gut twisted with unease. The move happened fast. Too fast. Garrett took a week off work to coordinate everything. Sienna hired a moving company and professional organizers. They descended on my home like a well-intentioned army, boxing up my life with ruthless efficiency. What about this? They'd ask, holding up photo albums, kitchen utensils, decorations collected over decades. Will this fit in your new apartment? Became the constant refrain. Most things didn't fit. Most things got labeled for donation, storage, or sale. My entire existence was being condensed down to what could fit in a 750 square foot apartment. The hardest part was Theo's things. His clothes still hung in our closet. I hadn't been able to bring myself to get rid of them. His tools were still in the garage. His reading glasses sat on the nightstand next to what had been his side of the bed. Mom, you have to let some of this go, Garrett said gently when he found me crying in the bedroom, holding one of Theo's old sweaters. He's not coming back. Keeping his things won't bring him back. I know that, I snapped. But they're all I have left of him. You have your memories, Sienna said from the doorway. You have photographs. But you can't live in the past, Eleanor. You have to move forward. Most of Theo's belongings ended up in boxes marked for donation. His tools, his books, his clothes, all of it sorted and removed with brutal efficiency. I managed to save a few things, his reading glasses, his favorite coffee mug, a photo album from his military service. But the medals. The medals were too large for my small apartment at Silver Pines. The display case Theo had made was 4 feet wide and 3 feet tall, meant to be mounted on a wall with proper brackets. It wouldn't fit anywhere in my new space. We'll keep it safe at the house, Garrett promised when I expressed concern. You can visit anytime you want to see them. The house? You mean my house? Right, your house, he corrected quickly. We'll just keep an eye on it while you're at Silver Pines. Make sure everything's secure. Something about the way he said it made my stomach clench, but I was too overwhelmed to argue. Moving day was chaos, boxes everywhere, movers tracking through my home, strangers handling my possessions. By the time they loaded the last box into the truck, I was exhausted and emotionally drained. I spent my first night at Silver Pines crying myself to sleep in a bed that wasn't mine, in a room that smelled like fresh paint instead of the lavender sachets I'd kept in my dresser for years, listening to unfamiliar sounds through thin walls. The first month was adjustment. Learning the meal schedule in the dining room, figuring out which activities I could tolerate, navigating the social hierarchies that existed even among people in their 70s and 80s. I made a few acquaintances, not friends, exactly, but people to sit with at meals. Constance from apartment 2B who'd lost her husband to dementia. Harold from down the hall who told the same stories on repeat. Betty from the book club who meant well but talked too much. It wasn't home. It would never be home. But I tried to make the best of it. I called Garrett several times a week, asking about the house, asking about the medals. "Everything's fine, Mom," he'd always say. "Don't worry about it. Just focus on settling in there." But Sienna stopped answering my calls. When I asked Garrett about it, he made excuses. "She's busy with work, she's traveling for a conference, she's not feeling well." It felt wrong, but I didn't know what to do about it. By the second month, I'd fallen into a routine. Breakfast at 7:30, morning activities, lunch at noon, afternoon rest, dinner at 5:30, television in the evening. It was predictable and safe and soul-crushingly boring. I felt like I was in a waiting room for death. The third month, I started planning my return home. 3 months had been the agreement. I'd given it a fair try, but this wasn't working. I wanted to go back to my house, my real home, where Theo's memory lived in every corner. On a Tuesday morning in June, 3 months and 2 days after I'd moved in, I called Garrett to tell him I was ready to move back. "Mom, let's talk about this," he said, his voice careful. "You're just getting settled there. Don't you think you should give it more time?" I gave it 3 months. That was the agreement. "I know, but, look, can we discuss this in person? How about dinner this weekend? I want to come home, Garrett. This weekend. I'll need help moving my things back." There was a long pause. "Mom, that's not going to be possible right now." "Why not?" Another pause. "We'll discuss it this weekend. I'll pick you up Saturday at 6. He hung up before I could argue further. Saturday couldn't come fast enough. I spent the week packing my few belongings, ready to leave Silver Pines and reclaim my life. When Garrett arrived, he looked tired and stressed. He barely spoke during the drive, and when I asked where we were going for dinner, he said, "Actually, I thought we'd go to the house. Have a family dinner there. Like old times." The house. My house. I felt a flutter of hope. Maybe this meant he was ready to let me move back. But when we pulled up to 742 Oakwood Drive, my heart stopped. There was a real estate sign in the front yard. For sale, it proclaimed in bold letters. "Coming soon, premium location, contact Ashford and Associates Realty." Ashford. Sienna's family business. "Garrett, what is that sign doing in my yard?" He wouldn't look at me. "Mom, let's go inside and talk." I was already out of the car, marching toward my front door. My hands shook as I tried to fit my key in the lock, but before I could turn it, the door opened from inside. Sienna stood there in expensive athleisure wear, her hair pulled back in a perfect ponytail, holding her phone. When she saw me, her expression flickered through surprise, annoyance, and finally settled on that practiced smile I'd come to despise. "Eleanor. What a surprise. We didn't expect you so early. What is that sign doing in my yard?" She stepped aside to let me in, and I immediately understood why she hadn't wanted me to come early. My house, my home, had been transformed. The familiar furniture was gone, replaced with modern, minimalist pieces that looked like they'd been staged from a catalog. The walls had been repainted in trendy grays and whites. My collection of family photos had been removed, replaced with generic landscape prints. Even the smell was different, some kind of vanilla reed diffuser instead of the potpourri I'd always kept. But what made my heart stop, what made the room spin around me, was the blank wall in the living room. The wall where Theo's display case had hung for 15 years. It was empty. Not just empty, there were 4 small holes where the mounting brackets had been, holes that had been hastily filled and painted over but were still visible if you knew where to look. "Where are the medals?" My voice came out as a whisper. "Mom," Garrett had come in behind me. "Where are Theodore's medals?" I was louder now, feeling panic rising in my throat. Sienna exchanged a look with Garrett. "Eleanor, why don't we all sit down and discuss this calmly?" "I don't want to sit down. I want to know where my husband's medals are." "They're safe," Garrett said quickly. "We put them in storage. With the house going on the market, we needed to depersonalize it, and the case was just taking up valuable wall space. Going on the market? I turned to face him. This is my house, Garrett. I never agreed to sell it. Mom, we've been over this. You can't afford to keep it. The property taxes, the maintenance, I don't care about the taxes. This is my home. It's not realistic, Sienna interjected. You're settled at Silver Pines now. You have friends there, activities. There's no point in maintaining an expensive house you're not living in. I'm not settled there. I told Garrett I want to move back home. That was always the agreement, 3 months to try it, and if I didn't like it, I could come back. Things have changed, Sienna said, her voice taking on an edge. Garrett and I have invested significant time and money into preparing this property for sale. We've covered the property taxes, the insurance, the utilities for 3 months while you've been at Silver Pines. We've paid for repairs, renovations, staging. We're in too deep now to just stop the process. I never asked you to do any of that. You couldn't afford to do it yourself, she shot back. Garrett has been subsidizing your lifestyle for months. Someone had to be practical about the situation. I looked at my son, searching his face for the boy I'd raised, the man I thought I knew. Is this true? You've been paying my bills? He had the grace to look uncomfortable. Mom, the property taxes were due. You didn't have the money in your account. What was I supposed to do, let the county start foreclosure proceedings? You were supposed to tell me. We could have figured something out together. I could have taken out a reverse mortgage, I could have, Mom, those are terrible financial decisions, Garrett interrupted. High interest rates, predatory terms. Sienna and I discussed it, and the best option was to sell while the market is strong, get you set up financially, and, you discussed it? You and Sienna discussed my house, my finances, my life, without including me? We were trying to protect you, Sienna said. You're not thinking clearly about these things, Eleanor. That's natural at your age, but, don't you dare, I cut her off, feeling rage building in my chest. Don't you dare talk about my age like it means I'm incompetent. I am 73 years old, not senile. This is my house. My decision. And I want my husband's medals returned to me immediately. Sienna's phone buzzed in her hand. She glanced at it, and her face went completely white. What is it? Garrett asked. Nothing. Just a client. But her voice was shaky. Sienna, what's wrong? She looked at him, then at me, and I saw something in her eyes I'd never seen before. Fear. Guilt. And something else, panic. Garrett, we need to talk. In private. No, I said firmly. Whatever you have to say it in front of me. What did you do? The silence stretched between the three of us. Sienna's phone buzzed again. She looked at it and actually swayed on her feet. Sienna? Garrett's voice was concerned now. What's going on? She swallowed hard. Eleanor, you need to understand. Those medals were just sitting here. Theodore's been gone for 2 years. You weren't even living here anymore. They were just collecting dust, serving no purpose. My blood went cold. What did you do? We got an excellent price, she said quickly, the words tumbling out. $50,000. Which, frankly, is going toward the expenses we've incurred helping you transition. The property taxes, the renovations, I didn't hear the rest. The room was spinning. You sold them. To a very reputable buyer, Sienna continued as if that mattered. Through eBay's authentication service. Everything was legitimate, documented, proper chain of custody. You sold my husband's medals. I could barely form the words. The medals he earned bleeding for this country. The Silver Star he got for saving 6 men under enemy fire in Fallujah. The Purple Heart from when an IED tore through his convoy and left him scarred for life. You sold them on the internet like they were garage sale junk? They weren't junk to the buyer, Sienna said defensively. He's a veteran himself, apparently. Someone who appreciates military history, and those medals belong to my husband who died serving this country. I was shouting now, didn't care who heard me. They were all I had left of him. They were his legacy, his proof that his suffering meant something, that his sacrifice mattered. You have pictures, Sienna said, her voice hardening. You have memories. But we needed actual money, Eleanor. Real resources to cover real expenses. Those medals were an asset sitting idle when they could be converted to cash that actually helps your situation. My situation? My situation? I was advancing on her now, fists clenched. You created my situation. You pressured me out of my home, you took over my finances, you renovated my house without permission, and now you've sold the only things that mattered to me, the only tangible pieces of my husband's service, his courage, his sacrifice. Mom, you need to calm down, Garrett said, stepping between us. Getting upset isn't helping anything. Calm down? You want me to calm down? Your wife just told me she sold your father's medals without my permission. Mom, Dad's gone. He's not coming back. At some point, you have to accept reality and move forward. Those medals, as meaningful as they were symbolically, were just sitting here. They had monetary value that could be put to practical use. Sienna made a business decision, I repeated, feeling something break inside my chest. Your father's silver star was a business decision. That's not what I meant. Those medals represented everything your father suffered for, I said, my voice shaking. The friends he lost, the men he saved, the nightmares that woke him up screaming 20 years after he came home. They were proof that his pain had meaning, that his sacrifice wasn't for nothing. And you let your wife sell them like they were scrap metal. Eleanor, you're being dramatic, Sienna interjected. Theodore's legacy isn't in some pieces of metal. It's in his son, in the life he built, get out, I said quietly. Excuse me? Get out of my house. Both of you. Mom, this isn't your house anymore, Garrett said, and the words hit me like a physical blow. What did you say? He looked miserable but determined. The paperwork went through last week. The title transferred to Sienna and me. You signed the documents when you moved into Silver Pines. I felt the floor drop out from under me. I never signed anything transferring my house to you. You signed a power of attorney, Sienna said. Authorizing Garrett to handle your financial and legal affairs. And you signed documents related to the sale of the property if you decided not to return from Silver Pines. You just didn't read the fine print. You tricked me. We protected you, she corrected. From making poor financial decisions that would have left you destitute. Now please, you're trespassing in our home, and you're clearly overwrought. Garrett, take your mother back to Silver Pines before this gets any worse. I'm calling the police, I said, pulling out my phone with shaking hands. And tell them what? Sienna asked, her voice cold now. That you signed legal documents you didn't bother to read? That we sold property that legally belongs to us now? Go ahead. Call them. They'll tell you it's a civil matter, and by the time you hire a lawyer and try to fight this, the house will be sold and the money will be long gone. I stared at this woman, this stranger who had systematically dismantled my life, stolen my home, and sold my husband's medals, all while pretending to be helpful and concerned. And I realized she was right. She had me trapped. The law was on her side because I'd been stupid enough to trust my own son, to sign papers without reading them carefully, to believe that family meant something more than financial transactions. Get out, Sienna said again. Before I call the police myself and have you removed for trespassing. Garrett reached for my arm. Come on, Mom. Let me drive you back to Silver Pines. We can talk more tomorrow when everyone's calmer. I jerked away from him. Don't touch me. Don't ever touch me again. I walked out of that house, my house, Theo's house, the home where we'd built our life together, and got into my own car. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely fit the key in the ignition. As I drove away, I looked in the rearview mirror and saw Garrett and Sienna standing in the doorway, silhouetted against the interior lights. They looked like strangers. They were strangers. The drive back to Silver Pines was a blur. I don't remember the route I took or how long it took me. I just remember sitting in the parking lot afterward, hands gripping the steering wheel, unable to make myself go inside to that sterile apartment that would never be home. Theo's medals were gone. Sold to some stranger on the internet for $50,000 that I would never see, money that Sienna claimed was owed for expenses I'd never authorized or even known about. Everything I'd held onto after Theo's death, the house, the medals, the physical proof that our life together had mattered, it was all gone. Taken by my own son and his wife, stolen legally through documents I'd signed in good faith. I thought about calling the police anyway, but I knew Sienna was right. This was a civil matter. I'd signed the papers, even if I didn't understand what I was signing. Even if they'd taken advantage of my grief and loneliness and trust. Finally, I made myself get out of the car and walk to my apartment. The hallway smelled like industrial cleaner and old people. Through thin walls, I could hear televisions playing, someone coughing, the general sounds of people waiting to die. Inside apartment 2F, I sat on my generic beige couch and stared at the generic beige walls, and I cried. For Theo, for our house, for his medals, for the son I thought I'd raised to be better than this, for the life that had been stolen from me one piece at a time. I cried until I had no tears left, until my eyes were swollen and my throat was raw. And then, as the darkness outside my window turned to gray pre-dawn light, I stopped crying. Because something else was rising up inside me. Something harder and colder than grief. Rage. They thought I was helpless. They thought I was helpless. They thought I was just a foolish old woman who'd signed away her rights and could do nothing but accept her fate. They were wrong. I spent that first night after discovering the theft sitting in my beige apartment at Silver Pines, staring at the walls, my mind racing. Sleep was impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Sienna's face when she'd admitted to selling Theo's medals. That mixture of defiance and calculation. She'd looked at me like I was an obstacle to be managed, not a person whose life she was destroying. By the time the sun rose on Wednesday morning, I'd made a decision. I wasn't going to just accept this. I was going to fight back. But I needed information first. I needed to understand exactly what they'd done, how they'd done it, and most importantly, how I could undo it. The first thing I did was skip breakfast in the communal dining room. I couldn't face the cheerful small talk and institutional scrambled eggs. Instead, I made instant coffee in my kitchenette and opened my laptop, an old DIL that Theo had bought me 5 years ago that I'd barely known how to use beyond checking email and looking at weather forecasts. I typed eBay military medals into the search bar and was immediately overwhelmed by results. Thousands of listings for military medals, patches, uniforms, everything imaginable from every war and conflict in American history. Some were clearly reproductions or commemorative items. Others claimed to be authentic, with detailed provenance and authentication certificates. How would I even know which listing was Theo's medals? The sale had apparently already completed. Sienna had said $50,000, past tense. That meant the listing was no longer active. But eBay must keep records, right? There had to be a way to track it. I spent 2 hours clicking through help pages and FAQs, getting more frustrated by the minute. The text was small, the language was technical, and I felt every one of my 73 years as I struggled to navigate the website. Finally, I found a customer service number and called it. Thank you for calling eBay customer support. This is Brandon. How can I help you today? Brandon sounded young, probably younger than my son. I took a deep breath and tried to explain my situation without breaking down. My husband's military medals were sold on your platform without my permission. I need to find out who bought them and get them back. I'm sorry to hear that, ma'am. Can I get your eBay username? I don't have one. My daughter-in-law sold them using her account. There was a pause. Okay, so to be clear, someone else sold items that belonged to you? Yes. Without my knowledge or permission. Ma'am, that sounds like theft. Have you filed a police report? Had I? Should I? Not yet. I just found out yesterday. I'm trying to understand what happened first. I understand. Unfortunately, I can't access account information for someone else's eBay account without their permission or a court order. For privacy reasons, you understand. But they're my medals. My late husband's medals. He earned them in combat. I completely understand, ma'am, and I'm very sorry for your situation. But eBay policy requires that disputes about ownership happen outside our platform. If you believe property was sold without your authorization, you need to file a police report and potentially pursue legal action. The buyer would be protected under our purchase policy as long as they had no knowledge the items were stolen. I felt my hope deflating. So you can't tell me who bought them? Not without a subpoena, ma'am. I'm really sorry. I thanked him and hung up, feeling defeated. But then I thought about what he'd said. The buyer would be protected as long as they had no knowledge the items were stolen. That meant the buyer was probably innocent in this. They'd paid $50,000 for metals they believed were legitimately for sale. $50,000. That was a staggering amount. Military medals could be valuable, especially those awarded for valor, but that seemed extraordinarily high. Theo's Silver Star, 2 Bronze Stars, and Purple Heart, along with his other service medals and ribbons, they were priceless to me, but $50,000 on the open market? I opened a new browser tab and searched for Silver Star medal value. The results were all over the place, anywhere from a few $100s to tens of thousands, depending on who it was awarded to, the historical significance, condition, provenance. Then I searched for Theodore Whitfield's Silver Star, and my heart stopped. There was a news article from 2007, when Theo had been awarded the Silver Star. Local veteran receives Silver Star for valor in Iraq, the headline read. The article described how Theo, then a master sergeant, had pulled 6 wounded soldiers from a burning vehicle while under enemy fire outside Fallujah. He'd made 3 trips into the kill zone, sustaining injuries himself, to ensure every soldier got out alive. I'd forgotten about that article. It had been a brief moment of local pride, photo ops with the mayor, a small ceremony at the VFW hall. Theo had hated the attention, had insisted the real heroes were the men who hadn't made it home. But the story had been documented. His name was in the historical record as a Silver Star recipient. That made his medals traceable. Verifiable. More valuable to collectors. More valuable to thieves. I kept searching, diving deeper into military medal collecting forums and auction sites. What I found made my skin crawl. There was an entire subculture of people who collected military medals, especially those with documented provenance. A Silver Star awarded to a specific soldier whose heroism was documented in news articles and military records. That could fetch premium prices. Sienna would have known this. She worked in real estate, but she was clearly smart about money, about finding value where others might not look. She would have researched this. She would have known exactly what Theo's medals were worth. This wasn't an impulsive decision. This was calculated theft. My phone rang, interrupting my research. It was Garrett. I let it go to voicemail. He called again 5 minutes later. Again, I didn't answer. By the 3rd call, I turned the phone off entirely. I wasn't ready to talk to him. I didn't trust myself not to say things I couldn't take back, or worse, to break down and cry, to let him hear how thoroughly he'd broken my heart. Around noon, there was a knock on my apartment door. I ignored it at first, assuming it was one of the activity coordinators trying to recruit me for afternoon bingo or chair yoga. But the knocking persisted. Eleanor? It's Constance from 2B. I saw you come in last night and you looked upset. Just checking on you, dear. I opened the door to find Constance Pemberton standing there with a plate of cookies and a concerned expression. Constance was 79, a tiny woman with snow-white hair and the kind of sharp eyes that didn't miss much. I'm fine, Constance. Thank you for checking. You're not fine. You're pale as a ghost and you look like you haven't slept. What happened? Something about her direct manner, the genuine concern in her voice, made my carefully constructed composure crumble. Before I knew it, I was crying again, telling her everything: the house, the medals, Sienna's betrayal, Garrett's complicity. Constance listened without interrupting, occasionally patting my hand. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "That's elder abuse," she said finally. "Financial exploitation. Your daughter-in-law manipulated you into giving up control of your assets, then stole from you. That's not just morally wrong, Eleanor. It's illegal. But I signed the papers, under false pretenses. You were grieving, isolated, under pressure. A good lawyer could argue you weren't of sound mind to make those decisions, or that you were coerced. I can't afford a good lawyer. I can barely afford this place." Constance's expression hardened. "Then we need to be smart about this. Before you spend money on lawyers, you need evidence. Documentation of what they've done. Once you have that, you'll have options. I don't even know where to start." "Start with what you know. They sold medals on eBay. eBay keeps records. Your daughter-in-law had to list them, photograph them, describe them, communicate with the buyer. All of that leaves a trail. eBay won't give me access to her account information." "No, but there are other ways to get information. Do you have access to your son's email? Any shared accounts from when you helped him with things in the past?" I thought about it. Years ago, when Garrett was in college, I'd helped him set up his first email account. He'd been terrible at remembering passwords, so I'd become his backup, helping him recover accounts when he got locked out. Did he still use the same email? The same password patterns? "Maybe," I said slowly. "Then that's where you start. You're not hacking into his accounts, you're accessing information about your own property. Those medals belong to you. You have every right to know what happened to them." Constance stayed with me for the next hour, helping me think through what I knew and what I needed to find out. She was surprisingly tech-savvy for her age, pulling up websites on my laptop and showing me how to search for information. "You said the sale happened recently? Within the last few weeks?" "She just told me yesterday, but I don't know exactly when it happened. If it was recent, there might still be communication in her email. Order confirmations, shipping notifications, messages from the buyer. eBay sends a lot of emails for every transaction. But I don't have access to her email." "No, but you might have access to your son's. And if they're married, they probably discuss financial matters via email. There might be something there." After Constance left, I sat down with my laptop and tried to remember Garrett's old email address. It was something generic, garrett.whitfield@gmail.com, if I remembered correctly. I pulled up the Gmail login page and typed it in. The system asked for a password. I tried a few combinations I thought Garrett might use. His birthday. His wedding anniversary. His father's name. All incorrect. After 3 failed attempts, I was locked out and asked to verify my identity. This was useless. I didn't know his current passwords, didn't have access to his phone for verification codes. I was stuck. But then I remembered something else. About a year ago, Garrett had asked me to help him with some paperwork related to Theo's veteran benefits. He'd emailed me documents to print and sign. Those emails would still be in my inbox, and they'd come from his email address. Maybe there was something useful there. I opened my own email and searched for messages from Garrett. Dozens of results came up, years of correspondence. I scrolled through, looking for anything recent, anything that might give me a clue. Then I found it. An email from 3 weeks ago with the subject line, "Documents for your review. Eleanor, please read through these carefully and sign where indicated. These will help streamline the financial management of your accounts and property while you're at Silver Pines. Let me know if you have questions. Love, G." Attached were 3 PDF documents. I downloaded them and opened them with shaking hands. The first was indeed a power of attorney document, giving Garrett broad authority to manage my financial and legal affairs. The second was a quitclaim deed, transferring ownership of my property to Garrett and Sienna Whitfield. The third was something called a healthcare directive and asset management agreement. I'd skimmed these documents when Garrett first sent them, trusting him when he said they were just standard paperwork to make managing my affairs easier while I was at Silver Pines. I'd signed them and sent them back, never imagining they were signing away my entire life. But now, reading them carefully, I saw the truth. These documents didn't just give Garrett authority to help me. They gave him complete control. The quitclaim deed had transferred my house to him for $1 and other valuable consideration, meaning essentially nothing. The asset management agreement gave him authority to sell, transfer, or dispose of my personal property as he saw fit, for the benefit and care of Eleanor Whitfield. For my benefit. He'd sold Theo's metals for my benefit. I felt sick, but I kept reading. At the bottom of each document was my signature, scanned and inserted digitally. Below that were 2 witness signatures, Sienna R. Whitfield and someone named Patricia Donovan. Patricia Donovan. The tour director at Silver Pines who'd shown us around. She'd witnessed my signature. Or had she? I tried to remember the day I'd signed these documents. Garrett had brought them to my apartment, had laid them out on my small kitchen table. Had Patricia been there? I didn't remember seeing her. But her signature was right there, along with Sienna's, certifying that I'd signed these documents voluntarily and of sound mind. This was fraud. They'd manipulated me into signing documents I didn't understand, possibly even forged witness signatures, all to legally steal everything I owned. But proving it would be difficult. The documents looked legitimate. My signature was genuine, even if I hadn't understood what I was signing. And unless Patricia Donovan was willing to testify that she never actually witnessed my signature, I had no way to challenge the validity of these documents. I needed help. Real help. I needed someone who understood legal documents and elder law and financial exploitation. I picked up my phone and called the one person I could think of who might have answers, Janet Harper, a social worker I'd met at a grief support group after Theo died. She worked for the county's Adult Protective Services Division and had given me her card, telling me to call if I ever needed anything. Eleanor. Janet's voice was warm and familiar. It's been months. How are you doing? I need help, I said, and my voice cracked. I think I'm being financially exploited by my son and his wife. There was a brief pause. Tell me everything. I spent the next 30 minutes explaining the situation, the pressure to move to Silver Pines, the documents I'd signed, the house that was no longer mine, and the metals that had been sold without my knowledge. Janet listened without interrupting. When I finished, she let out a long breath. Eleanor, what you're describing is textbook financial elder abuse. Your son and daughter-in-law used their position of trust and your emotional vulnerability to gain control of your assets. The question is whether we can prove it and whether we can recover any of what you've lost. Can you help me? I can open an investigation, yes. But I need to be honest with you, these cases are difficult. You signed legal documents. Even if you didn't fully understand them, even if you were under emotional duress, proving coercion is hard. And if the property has already been transferred or sold, recovering it is even harder. What about the metals? Can we get those back? That depends on several factors. Who bought them, whether they knew they were stolen, whether the sale can be legally voided. It's complicated. But we can try. We can try. First, I need you to document everything. Every conversation you remember about moving to Silver Pines, about signing documents, about the metals. Times, dates, what was said. Any emails, text messages, voicemails, save everything. Don't delete anything, even if it seems insignificant. Okay. What else? I'm going to assign an investigator to your case. Her name is Teresa Kim, and she's excellent at tracking financial exploitation. She'll want to interview you, look at your bank records, review those documents you signed. In the meantime, do not communicate with your son or daughter-in-law. Don't answer their calls, don't respond to emails. Anything you say to them can be used to claim you're consenting to their actions. Garrett's been calling. I haven't answered. Good. Keep it that way. And Eleanor? This is important. Do not tell them you're investigating this or that you've contacted APS. If they know an investigation is coming, they might start hiding assets or covering their tracks. We need to move quietly until we have enough evidence to act. After I hung up with Janet, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Hope. Not much, just a flicker, but it was there. I wasn't helpless. I had options. I had people willing to help me. I spent the rest of that day documenting everything I could remember. I opened a Word document and started typing, recording every conversation I could recall from the past 6 months. The pressure to move to Silver Pines. The papers I'd signed. The promises that were made and then broken. Sienna's admission that she'd sold the medals. My fingers cramped and my eyes burned from staring at the screen, but I kept going. This was my evidence. This was my ammunition. By evening, I had 15 pages of detailed notes, organized by date and topic. It wasn't perfect, my memory was fuzzy on some details, and I'd undoubtedly forgotten some conversations, but it was a start. I printed 2 copies. One I kept in my apartment, hidden in a folder marked Medical Records, that no one would think to look through. The other I put in an envelope addressed to Janet Harper at Adult Protective Services. I'd mail it tomorrow. That night, I actually slept. Not well, and not deeply, but for the first time since discovering what Garrett and Sienna had done, I didn't lie awake all night consumed by helpless rage. I was doing something. I was fighting back. Thursday morning, I was up early. I skipped the communal breakfast again. I couldn't handle the small talk and the cheerful retirees pretending their lives hadn't been reduced to scheduled activities and early bird specials. Instead, I made coffee and returned to my research. I'd been thinking about what the eBay customer service rep had said. The buyer would be protected as long as they had no knowledge the items were stolen. That meant somewhere, there was a person who'd paid $50,000 for Theo's medals. A person who probably thought they'd made a legitimate purchase. What if I could find that person? What if I could explain the situation, convince them that the medals had been stolen, ask them to return them? It was a long shot, but what did I have to lose? The problem was figuring out how to find them. eBay wouldn't tell me. Sienna certainly wouldn't. But there had to be a way. I thought about the collector forums I'd found during my research. Military medal collectors were passionate, often posting about their acquisitions, sharing information about rare finds. If someone had just purchased a Silver Star awarded to a specific, documented soldier, they might have mentioned it somewhere. I started searching military collector forums for recent posts about Silver Star medals. It took hours of reading through threads and posts, most of which were about medals I'd never heard of from wars I barely remembered. But finally, I found something. A forum called Military Collectibles Archive had a section for recent acquisitions. 3 weeks ago, a user named Patriot Collector 47 had posted, just acquired a Silver Star grouping with exceptional provenance. Master Sergeant Theodore Whitfield, awarded 2007 for actions in Fallujah. Complete documentation and original display case. Can't believe this came up for sale. A real piece of history. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely breathe. That was Theo's Silver Star. This person, Patriot Collector 47, had bought my husband's medals. The post had several replies from other collectors congratulating him on the find, discussing the historical significance, asking about the provenance documentation. Patriot Collector 47 had been happy to share details, the news article about the award ceremony, photos of Theo receiving the medal, even documentation of the specific action that earned him the Silver Star. He'd done his research. This wasn't some casual collector. This was someone who deeply valued military history and the men who earned these honors. At the end of the thread, Patriot Collector 47 had mentioned he was a Navy veteran himself, retired after 20 years of service. These medals represent the best of what our country asks of its warriors, he'd written. I'm honored to be their custodian and to ensure MSGT Whitfield's heroism is remembered. Custodian. Not owner. Custodian. This man saw himself as protecting Theo's legacy, not just owning expensive collectibles. Maybe, just maybe, if I could reach him and explain the situation, he'd understand. He'd help me get Theo's medals back. But how could I contact him? The forum didn't allow direct messaging to other users unless you were a registered member, and registration required approval. I could create an account and request membership, but that could take days or weeks. I didn't have that kind of time. I clicked on Patria Collector 47's profile, hoping to find more information. His profile was sparse, just a join date, he'd been a member for 8 years, and a location, Portland, Oregon. Portland. That was only 2 hours from Maplewood Heights. My mind was racing. If Patria Collector 47 lived in Portland, if he was a Navy veteran, if he was active in military collector circles, someone might know him. Portland had a large veteran community. The VFW posts, American Legion halls, military museums, someone in those circles might recognize a serious collector who'd recently acquired a significant Silver Star grouping. It was thin, but it was something. I grabbed my phone and called the Portland Veterans Affairs office. After navigating through an automated menu system, I finally reached a human being. Portland, VA, this is Marcus speaking. Hello, my name is Eleanor Whitfield. I'm trying to track down someone who I believe is a veteran in the Portland area. He's a collector of military medals and memorabilia. Ma'am, I can't give out personal information about veterans. I understand. I'm not asking for personal information. I'm trying to recover my late husband's military medals that were sold without my permission. I believe a Portland area veteran purchased them, and I'm hoping to contact him to explain the situation. There was a pause. Ma'am, that sounds like a police matter. Have you filed a report? I'm working on that. But I'm hoping to resolve this directly with the buyer. He's innocent in this. He purchased the medals legitimately. I just want to explain what happened and ask for his help getting them back. I really can't help you track down specific veterans, ma'am. Privacy laws, you understand. Is there a collectors club or organization in Portland? Somewhere veterans who collect military items might gather? Another pause. You could try the Oregon Military Museum. They have events sometimes, collector shows, that kind of thing. Might be a place to start. I thanked him and hung up, then immediately searched for the Oregon Military Museum. Their website showed they hosted a quarterly military collectibles show and swap meet. The next one was scheduled for this coming Saturday, just 2 days away. It was a long shot. Patria Collector 47 might not attend. He might not even be in the area. But it was the best lead I had. I made a decision. I was going to Portland on Saturday. I was going to that show. And I was going to find the man who had my husband's medals. But first, I needed to prepare. I needed photographs of Theo wearing his medals. I needed copies of the award documentation. I needed to be able to prove who I was and establish that these medals belonged to my husband. I spent the rest of Thursday gathering materials. I dug through the boxes I'd brought to Silver Pines and found photo albums with pictures of Theo in his dress uniform. There he was at the VFW Hall in 2007, his Silver Star newly pinned to his chest, standing stiffly uncomfortable with the attention. There he was at our 40-year anniversary party, wearing his medals because I'd asked him to, looking tired but proud. There he was at a Memorial Day parade the year before he died, walking with other veterans, his medals catching the sunlight. I made copies of everything. I printed out the news article about his Silver Star. I found his military discharge papers, DD Form 214, that listed all his awards and decorations. I assembled a folder of documentation that proved beyond any doubt that Theodore Whitfield was my husband and those medals were his. Friday morning, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Mrs. Whitfield? This is Teresa Kim from Adult Protective Services. Janet Harper asked me to give you a call. Teresa had a brisk, professional voice. We arranged to meet that afternoon at a coffee shop in Maplewood Heights, neutral territory where we could talk privately. Teresa was younger than I expected, maybe 40, with sharp eyes behind stylish glasses and a no-nonsense demeanor. She ordered a black coffee and pulled out a legal pad and a digital recorder. Do you consent to me recording this conversation for my investigation? Yes. She turned on the recorder and we began. For the next 2 hours, I told her everything. She took notes, asked clarifying questions, stopped me occasionally to make sure she had details correct. When I showed her the documents I'd signed, the power of attorney, the quitclaim deed, the asset management agreement, her expression hardened. These are problematic, she said. The language is very broad, almost deliberately so. Your son has essentially complete control over your assets with very little oversight or limitation. Can we reverse them? That's a legal question for a lawyer. But from my perspective as an investigator, there are red flags here that suggest exploitation. The timing, getting you to sign these right after moving you to assisted living. The witnesses, one of whom is the spouse who benefits from these documents. The failure to explain what you were signing. All of that points to exploitation. What happens now? I'm opening a formal investigation. I'll interview your son and daughter-in-law, review financial records, talk to witnesses. If I find evidence of exploitation, I can refer the case for criminal prosecution. I can also help you petition the court to revoke the power of attorney and potentially reverse the property transfer. How long will that take? Teresa's expression softened. I won't lie to you, Mrs. Whitfield. These cases move slowly. Months, maybe longer. And the outcome isn't guaranteed. Your son can hire lawyers, challenge everything, drag it out. It's going to be difficult. What about the metals? Can you help me get those back? That's trickier. The metals were sold through eBay, which complicates things. The buyer is a third party who likely had no knowledge they were stolen. Recovering them would require either convincing the buyer to return them voluntarily or going through civil court to have the sale voided. Both options are complicated. I'm going to try talking to the buyer myself. Tomorrow. I think I know who he is. Teresa looked concerned. Mrs. Whitfield, I'd advise against that. If you contact the buyer directly and say the wrong thing, you could complicate any legal action later. I don't care about legal complications. Those metals were my husband's. They're all I have left of him. If there's even a chance I can convince this person to give them back, I have to try. Teresa studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. If you do this, be careful what you say. Don't make threats, don't accuse anyone of crimes, don't promise anything you can't deliver. Just explain the situation calmly and ask for help. Can you do that? I can try. And Mrs. Whitfield? Document the conversation. Take notes immediately afterward about what was said. If this does end up in court, everything matters. I left the coffee shop feeling both encouraged and overwhelmed. I had an official investigation underway. I had help. But I also had a long, difficult fight ahead of me with no guarantee of success. That night, I barely slept again. I kept thinking about Saturday, about the military collectibles show, about what I'd say if I actually found Patriot Collector 47. How do you approach a stranger and tell them they possess stolen property? How do you explain that you're not trying to attack them, you're just a grieving widow trying to recover the last pieces of her husband's legacy? Saturday morning arrived with gray skies and a cold rain. I dressed carefully in slacks and a sweater, trying to look respectable and non-threatening. I packed my folder of documentation, made sure my phone was charged, and drove to Portland. The Oregon Military Museum was located in an old armory building on the outskirts of the city. The parking lot was already half full when I arrived at 9:30 a.m. Inside, dozens of tables were set up with vendors selling everything imaginable: uniforms, helmets, medals, patches, photos, documents, equipment from every American war. The crowd was mostly men, mostly older, many wearing veteran caps indicating their service. I felt out of place and conspicuous, an elderly woman wandering alone through a space clearly dominated by male collectors and veterans. I walked slowly through the aisles, pretending to browse while really scanning faces and listening to conversations. How would I recognize Patriot Collector 47? I had no idea what he looked like. I only knew he was a Navy veteran and a serious collector. After an hour of searching, I was starting to lose hope. There were too many people, too many conversations happening at once. Patriot Collector 47 might not even be here. This whole trip might be pointless. Then I heard it. Yeah, I just picked up a Silver Star grouping last month. MSGT Theodore Whitfield, awarded for actions in Fallujah. Beautiful piece, complete documentation. It's going to be the centerpiece of my display. The voice was coming from a table near the back, partially hidden by other vendors. I moved closer, my heart pounding. Two men were standing by the table, both in their 60s, both wearing Navy veteran caps. One was showing the other something in a display case. I couldn't see what from my angle. That's a hell of a find, the other man was saying. Whitfield's action was significant. 6 men saved under fire. You don't see Silver Stars with that kind of documented heroism come up for sale very often. I know. I still can't believe it. The seller said it was an estate sale, family needed to liquidate assets. I felt guilty taking advantage of that, but I'm going to honor this man's service properly. I stepped closer, finally able to see into the display case. There they were. Theo's medals. The Silver Star with its distinctive red, white and blue ribbon. The Bronze Stars. The Purple Heart. All arranged carefully on blue velvet, exactly as they'd been displayed in our living room for 15 years. Excuse me, I said, my voice shaking. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I couldn't help overhearing. Those medals, did you say they belonged to Theodore Whitfield? Both men turned to look at me. The one who'd been showing off the medals smiled politely. Yes, ma'am. Do you know about MSGT Whitfield service? He was my husband, I said quietly. The smile froze on his face. The display case nearly slipped from his hands. The smile froze on his face. The display case nearly slipped from his hands. Your husband, he stammered, carefully setting the case back down on the table. Mrs. Whitfield? Eleanor Whitfield, yes. My voice was steadier than I felt. Theodore was my husband. He died 2 years ago. The other man had taken a step back, his expression shifting from curious to uncomfortable. The collector, Patriot Collector 47, I was certain now, looked stricken, his face going pale beneath his Navy veteran cap. Ma'am, I bought these through eBay. The seller said it was an estate sale. Everything was legitimate, authenticated, documented. I had no idea, I would never have. He was stumbling over his words, clearly panicked. I know, I said quickly. I'm not here to accuse you of anything. You're not the one who did wrong. May I explain what happened? He nodded mutely, gesturing to a pair of folding chairs near his table. The other man excused himself, sensing this was about to become a private conversation. I sat down, feeling every one of my 73 years, and the collector, I still didn't know his real name, sat across from me, the display case with Theo's medals between us like evidence at a trial. My name is Robert Chin, he said finally. Navy, retired after 22 years. I've been collecting military memorabilia for about a decade now, mostly Navy items, but when I saw your husband's Silver Star come up for sale. He trailed off, shaking his head. MSGT Whitfield's actions in Fallujah were extraordinary. 6 men saved under direct enemy fire. That kind of valor deserves to be remembered, honored. I thought I was preserving a hero's legacy. You were, I said, surprised by the gentleness in my own voice. Theodore would have appreciated that someone understood what those medals meant. But they were sold without my knowledge or permission by my daughter-in-law. I only found out 4 days ago. Robert's expression shifted from discomfort to anger. She stole them? From you? In a manner of speaking. It's complicated. I pulled out my folder of documentation and showed him everything. The photos of Theo wearing his medals, the death certificate proving I was his widow, the timeline of how Garrett and Sienna had pressured me into Silver Pines, taken control of my finances, and eventually sold my husband's medals without my consent. Robert listened, his jaw tightening as I explained. When I showed him the emails where Garrett had sent me documents to sign, documents I hadn't fully understood, his hands clenched into fists. This is elder abuse, he said flatly. Financial exploitation. My mother went through something similar with my sister before I found out and stopped it. These people, your own family, they prey on trust and grief and confusion. I've contacted Adult Protective Services, I said. There's an investigation underway. But recovering the medals is complicated because you're an innocent purchaser. You paid $50,000 in good faith. $53,000, actually, Robert said quietly. Including shipping and insurance. It was the most I've ever spent on a single acquisition. He looked down at the display case, his expression pained. Mrs. Whitfield, I'm sick about this. I pride myself on ethical collecting, on respecting the veterans whose service I document. The thought that I participated, even unknowingly, in victimizing a veteran's widow. You didn't know, I said. The fault is entirely with my daughter-in-law. She's the one who sold them. She's the one who stole from me. Still. He was quiet for a long moment, staring at the medals. Then he looked up at me with resolve in his eyes. These belong to you. They should have never been sold. I'll return them. I felt my throat tighten with unexpected emotion. Mr. Chen, you paid $53,000. Money I'll try to recover through eBay's buyer protection program and, if necessary, legal action against the seller. But that's my problem to solve, not yours. These medals represent your husband's sacrifice. His courage. His blood. They belong with his family, with you, not in a collector's display case. I can't ask you to do this. You'll lose everything you paid, Mrs. Whitfield. With all due respect, you're not asking. I'm offering. No, I'm insisting. His voice was firm now. I'm a veteran. Your husband was a veteran. We take care of our own, and that includes taking care of our families. If I keep these medals knowing how they were obtained, knowing the pain it causes you, I'd be no better than the people who stole them. I couldn't speak. Tears were streaming down my face, and I couldn't find words adequate to express what I was feeling. This stranger, this man I'd met 10 minutes ago, was giving up $53,000 because it was the right thing to do. Robert carefully opened the display case and began removing the medals, handling each one with reverence. Tell me about him, he said as he worked. Tell me about Theodore. So I did. As Robert wrapped each medal in tissue paper and placed them carefully in a padded box he pulled from under his table, I told him about Theo. About how we'd met at a USO dance in 1978. About his 3 tours of duty and the nightmares that followed. About the day he pulled those 6 soldiers from the burning vehicle, earning the Silver Star but never talking about it except to say the real heroes were the ones who didn't make it home. About our 45 years together, the struggles and the joy, and how I'd held his hand when he died, his last words a whispered, "I love you." By the time I finished, Robert's eyes were wet too. He sounds like he was a hell of a man, he said, handing me the box containing all of Theo's medals. And you sound like you were exactly the kind of partner a man like that deserved. Thank you, I whispered. For understanding. For your kindness. For giving these back when you had no legal obligation to do so. I have a moral obligation, Robert corrected. That's stronger than any legal one. He pulled a business card from his wallet and handed it to me. I'm going to pursue getting my money back through eBay. They have buyer protection policies for situations involving stolen property. I'll need your contact information, and potentially a statement about the theft for their investigation. Are you comfortable with that? Of course. Whatever you need. We exchanged information, and Robert promised to send me documentation of his purchase, the eBay listing, the communication with the seller, the payment records. This will help your case too, he explained. If you're pursuing legal action or criminal charges against your daughter-in-law, having proof of the sale and the amount will be important. Before I left, Robert shook my hand firmly. Mrs. Whitfield, I'm sorry this happened to you. But I'm honored to have met you and to play even a small part in making this right. Your husband's service mattered. His sacrifice mattered. And so do you. I drove back to Maplewood Heights clutching that box like it contained Theo himself. In a way, it did. These medals were the physical proof of his courage, his honor, his willingness to sacrifice everything for others. Having them back felt like having a piece of him back. But as the relief and gratitude faded during the 2-hour drive, something else rose to take its place. Anger. Cold, focused anger. Sienna had stolen these medals, sold them for $53,000, and where had that money gone? Not to my care at Silver Pines. Not to maintaining the house she'd stolen from me. It had gone into her pocket, funding her lifestyle while she claimed it was all for my benefit. And Garrett. My son. The boy I'd raised alone after his father left, the child I'd sacrificed everything for, had stood by and let it happen. Worse, he'd helped orchestrate it. They thought I was helpless. They thought I was just a confused old woman who'd signed away her rights and had no recourse. They thought wrong. By the time I pulled into the Silver Pines parking lot, I knew what I had to do. I took the box of medals up to my apartment and placed them carefully in my bedroom closet, hidden beneath folded blankets where no one would think to look. Then I called Teresa Kim. Mrs. Whitfield, it's Saturday evening. Is everything all right? I have the medals back, I said. I found the buyer and he returned them to me. There was a pause. He voluntarily returned $53,000 worth of medals. He's a veteran. He understood. Teresa, I need to know, where does the investigation stand? I've conducted preliminary interviews with staff at Silver Pines and reviewed the documents you provided. I'm scheduled to interview your son and daughter-in-law on Monday. Mrs. Whitfield, I have to tell you, the evidence of exploitation is strong. The timing, the documents, the failure to provide adequate explanation of what you were signing, it's a clear pattern. Can we get criminal charges filed? That's up to the district attorney's office. I can make a recommendation based on my findings, but they decide whether to prosecute. Why? Because I want them to understand they can't do this. Not just to me, but to anyone. How many other elderly people has Sienna exploited in her real estate business? How many other families has she manipulated? Those are good questions, Teresa said carefully. Questions that a criminal investigation might answer. But Mrs. Whitfield, you need to prepare yourself for the possibility that even if charges are filed, they might not result in conviction. These cases are difficult to prosecute. I understand. But at least they'll know they're not untouchable. At least there will be consequences. Sunday was quiet. I attended the church service in Silver Pines Chapel, something I hadn't done since moving in, and found unexpected comfort in the familiar hymns and prayers. Constance sat beside me, and afterward, she invited me to her apartment for tea. You look different, she observed as she poured Earl Grey into delicate china cups. Lighter somehow. I got Theo's medals back, I said, and told her about Robert Chin, about his incredible kindness in returning them without hesitation. Constance smiled. See? There are still good people in this world. People who do the right thing even when it costs them. Unlike my son and his wife. Unlike them, she agreed. What happens now? Now we fight. Adult Protective Services is investigating. I have the medals back as evidence. I have documentation of everything they did. And tomorrow, Teresa Kim interviews Garrett and Sienna. Do you think they'll confess? No. They'll lie. They'll claim everything was legitimate, that I understood what I was signing, that they were acting in my best interest. But I don't need them to confess. I just need the evidence to speak for itself. Monday morning, I was too anxious to eat breakfast. I tried to distract myself with a book but couldn't focus on the words. Around 10 o'clock, my phone rang. It was Teresa. "Mrs. Whitfield, I just finished interviewing your son and daughter-in-law. I thought you'd want an update." "How did it go?" "About as expected. They're denying any wrongdoing. They claim you willingly signed all documents after having them explained thoroughly. They say the metals were sold with your implicit consent because you'd given your son power of attorney to manage all your assets. They characterize the entire situation as you having second thoughts about decisions you legitimately made and now trying to blame them." My heart sank. "You don't believe them, do you?" "What I believe doesn't matter. What I can prove matters. And Mrs. Whitfield, there are some significant problems with their story." "Like what?" "Like the fact that Patricia Donovan, the woman whose signature appears as a witness on your documents, says she never witnessed you signing anything. She remembers showing you and your son around Silver Pines, but she has no memory of witnessing legal documents. She certainly didn't sign as a witness." "She didn't?" "No. Which means that witness signature is likely forged. That's a felony. Additionally, your daughter-in-law made some statements during our interview that contradict things she wrote in emails and text messages. She's not as careful as she thinks she is." "What happens now?" "I'm filing my report with the DA's office this week with a recommendation for criminal prosecution on charges of elder financial abuse, fraud, and forgery. I'm also recommending they investigate your daughter-in-law's real estate business for similar patterns of exploitation with other elderly clients." "Will they actually prosecute?" "I think so. The evidence is strong, and this is exactly the kind of case that gets public attention. Authorities like to show they're protecting vulnerable populations. But I can't promise anything." "Thank you, Teresa. For everything. Mrs. Whitfield, I'm just doing my job. You're the one who fought back. You're the one who refused to accept being victimized. That takes courage." After hanging up, I sat in my apartment feeling strangely calm. I'd done what I could. The wheels of justice were turning, slowly but surely. Whatever happened next was out of my hands. But there was one more thing I needed to do. I pulled out my phone and, for the first time in over a week, called Garrett. He answered on the second ring. "Mom." His voice was tight, controlled. "I was wondering when you'd call. We need to talk. In person." "I don't think that's a good idea. You're clearly upset, and, Garrett, I have Theodore's medals back." Silence. "Then, what?" "I found the man who bought them. Robert Chen, a Navy veteran and collector. I explained the situation, and he returned them to me. All of them." "Mom, that's great. I'm glad you got them back. But that doesn't change the fact that you and Sienna stole them? That you forged witness signatures on legal documents? That you exploited my grief and confusion to steal my home and my husband's legacy? It wasn't like that. We were trying to help you." "No," I interrupted, my voice hard. "You were trying to help yourselves. To my house, to Theo's medals, to whatever else you could take. And you used my trust in you, my love for you, as a weapon against me." "Mom, please, Adult Protective Services is recommending criminal charges. The district attorney's office is reviewing the case. The buyer of Theo's medals is pursuing legal action against Sienna through eBay for selling stolen property. And I'm consulting with an attorney about reversing the property transfer and revoking your power of attorney." The silence on the other end was deafening. "You're destroying our family," Garrett said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "No, Garrett. You destroyed our family the day you decided your mother was nothing more than an inconvenience standing between you and money. I raised you better than this. Your father would be ashamed." "Don't," he said sharply. "Don't bring Dad into this. He's dead. He doesn't get a vote. He earned those medals with his blood. With his nightmares. With years of suffering that you never saw because I protected you from it. Those metals weren't yours to sell. That house wasn't yours to take. And I wasn't yours to manipulate. So what now? His voice had turned cold. You're going to send us to prison? Ruin our lives over some pieces of metal and a house you couldn't afford anyway. I'm going to let justice take its course. What happens to you is a consequence of your choices, not my vindictiveness. I'm your son. You were my son, I said quietly. The son I raised would never have done this. I don't know who you've become, but he's not my child anymore. I hung up before he could respond, before I could hear whatever justifications or accusations he would throw at me next. My hands were shaking, but not from fear or uncertainty. From finality. I'd said what needed to be said. That chapter of my life was closed. 3 weeks later, I was sitting in the office of Margaret Torres, an elder law attorney Janet had recommended. Margaret was in her 50s, sharp-eyed and no-nonsense, with gray-streaked black hair pulled back in a professional bun. Mrs. Whitfield, I've reviewed all the documents you provided, and I have good news. We have strong grounds to challenge both the power of attorney and the property transfer. Really? Yes. The forged witness signature on the documents is the key. Without a legitimate witness, the documents can be challenged as invalid. Additionally, there's evidence you weren't provided with adequate explanation of what you were signing. Your son's own emails describe them as routine paperwork, when they were actually comprehensive transfers of authority and property. That's fraud. Can we get my house back? Possibly. They haven't sold it yet, correct? No, it's still on the market. Though Sienna keeps lowering the price. She's desperate to sell. Good. I'm filing an emergency injunction tomorrow to prevent any sale while the legal issues are resolved. I'm also filing a petition to revoke the power of attorney and void the property transfer based on fraud and exploitation. How long will this take? Margaret smiled sympathetically. Months, probably. Maybe longer if they fight it. But Mrs. Whitfield, the evidence is on your side. The forged signature alone is enough to invalidate the documents. Everything else just strengthens the case. What about criminal charges? The DA's office filed charges last week. Elder financial abuse, fraud, and forgery. Your son and daughter-in-law have been arraigned. They're out on bail, but they're facing serious charges. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt sad. This was my son facing criminal charges. The baby I'd rocked, the child I'd loved, the young man I'd been so proud of. Somewhere along the way, he'd lost his moral compass. Or maybe I'd just never seen who he really was. There's one more thing, Margaret said, pulling out another document. Mr. Chen, the collector who returned your husband's metals, his case against the eBay seller is moving forward. eBay's investigation found that your daughter-in-law misrepresented the provenance of the metals, claiming they were being sold with family consent when they weren't. They've refunded Mr. Chen's full purchase price and banned your daughter-in-law from the platform. She's also being sued by eBay for fraud. They refunded him? All $53,000? Yes. And eBay is pursuing recovery from your daughter-in-law. She'll owe them that money plus damages. Between that, the legal fees for the criminal case, and the civil suits, she and your son are facing financial ruin. I thought about that. Financial ruin. Everything they'd schemed for, everything they'd stolen from me, it was all crumbling around them. They'd gambled on my helplessness and lost. Mrs. Whitfield? Margaret's voice broke through my thoughts. How are you feeling about all this? Honestly? I don't know. Part of me feels vindicated. They're facing consequences for what they did. But part of me just feels sad. Garrett is my son. I raised him. I loved him. And he turned into someone I don't recognize. That's not your failure, Margaret said gently. Adults make their own choices. Your son chose greed over love, money over integrity. That's on him, not you. The following months were a blur of legal proceedings, court dates, depositions, and paperwork. The criminal case against Garrett and Sienna moved forward. The evidence was overwhelming: the forged witness signature, the documented pattern of exploitation, the stolen metals, the fraudulent eBay sale. Their lawyers tried every tactic they could think of to get charges dismissed or reduced, but nothing worked. In the civil case, Judge Patricia Morrison ruled in my favor on almost every point. The power of attorney was revoked due to fraud. The property transfer was voided. The house on Oakwood Drive was legally mine again. On a cold morning in November, nearly 8 months after discovering my metals had been stolen, I stood on the front porch of 742 Oakwood Drive with Margaret Torres and a locksmith, waiting for the court-ordered property turnover to be executed. Garrett and Sienna arrived in separate cars. Apparently they were now separated, their marriage another casualty of their scheme. Sienna looked haggard, her perfect appearance diminished by stress and legal troubles. Garrett wouldn't meet my eyes. They handed over the keys without speaking. The locksmith changed all the locks while we waited. When he finished, Margaret handed me the new keys. "Mrs. Whitfield, the property is legally yours again. Full ownership, clear title. They have no claim to it." I took the keys and walked into my house, my real home, for the first time in 9 months. It smelled different, looked different, but it was mine. The empty space on the living room wall where Theo's medals had hung seemed to pulse with absence, but I knew exactly how to fix that. That afternoon, with Constance's help, she'd become a dear friend through all of this, I rehung Theo's display case. We mounted it carefully on the same wall, in the same spot, using the same bracket holes that had never quite been successfully hidden. The medals gleamed under the living room light. The silver star, the bronze stars, the purple heart, all the others. Back where they belonged. Back home. "He'd be proud of you, you know," Constance said, standing beside me. "For fighting back. For not accepting what they tried to do to you." "I hope so. Sometimes I wonder if I should have just let it go. They're facing criminal charges, financial ruin, their marriage is over. Garrett is my son. Should a mother do this to her child? Should a son do what he did to his mother?" Constance countered. "Eleanor, you didn't create these consequences. They did. You just refused to be a victim. There's a difference." The criminal trial happened in February, nearly a year after this nightmare began. I attended every day, sitting in the courtroom gallery, listening to prosecutors lay out the case. They called it systematic elder financial exploitation. They described how Garrett and Sienna had isolated me, pressured me, manipulated me into signing away my rights, then stolen my property for profit. Teresa Kim testified. Robert Chin testified, describing how the metals had been sold on eBay and explaining why he'd returned them. Margaret Torres testified about the forged witness signature and the fraudulent property transfer. Patricia Donovan testified that she'd never witnessed me signing anything and had certainly never signed as a witness herself. The defense tried to paint me as a confused old woman who'd made decisions she later regretted, who was now vindicatively punishing her son for trying to help her. But the evidence was too strong. The forged signature. The emails where they discussed selling the house and metals. Sienna's social media posts about expensive vacations and purchases made right after the metals were sold. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all charges. Sienna received 3 years in prison plus restitution. Garrett received 18 months plus restitution. Both would be required to repay the $53,000 from the metal sale, plus additional amounts for the property taxes and maintenance they'd claimed to pay but had actually taken from my accounts without authorization. I didn't feel triumph when the verdict was read. I felt relief. And sadness. And a strange sense of closure. Garrett looked at me once as they led him out of the courtroom. His eyes held something I couldn't quite read: regret, maybe, or resentment, or just exhaustion. I looked back at him steadily. I'd done what I had to do. I protected myself and held him accountable. If he someday understood why, maybe we could rebuild something. But I wasn't holding my breath. Now, it's been 18 months since that awful day when I discovered Theo's medals were gone. I'm back in my house on Oakwood Drive, surrounded by memories of the life Theo and I built together. The medals hang in their proper place, catching the afternoon light just like they always did. I'm 75 now, still independent, still managing just fine in this house that Garrett and Sienna claimed was too much for me. My knees ache and I move slower than I used to, but I'm not helpless. I never was. Constance visits twice a week. We've become close friends, bound by our experiences with family betrayal and our determination not to be defined by it. Robert Shin sends me Christmas cards and occasionally calls to check on me. He's become an unexpected friend, another veteran family member looking out for me the way Theo would have wanted. Garrett is in minimum security prison, eligible for parole in a few months. He's written me twice. Both times, the letters were full of justifications and excuses, explaining why what he did wasn't really wrong, how I overreacted, how he was just trying to help. I haven't written back. Maybe someday he'll understand what he did. Maybe someday he'll genuinely apologize. But I'm not waiting for that day. Sienna is in a different facility. She hasn't tried to contact me. I doubt she ever will. The house on Oakwood Drive is mine again, free and clear. The medals are home. Theodore's legacy is protected. And I've learned something important: being old doesn't mean being helpless. Being vulnerable doesn't mean being a victim. I fought back. I refused to accept injustice. And I won. Every morning, I make my coffee and sit in the living room where Theo's medals hang, and I talk to him. I tell him about my day, about the people I've met, about Constance's terrible jokes and Robert's kind emails. I tell him that his sacrifice still matters, that his medals are safe, that I protected them the way he protected those 6 soldiers in Fallujah, by refusing to give up no matter what it cost. And sometimes, when the afternoon light hits the silver star just right, I swear I can feel him there with me, proud and protective, the way he always was. They tried to take everything from me. My home, my husband's legacy, my dignity, my independence. They thought I was too old, too confused, too trusting to fight back. They were wrong. And that's my story. I'm Eleanor Whitfield, I'm 75 years old, and I'm still standing. Still fighting. Still here. To anyone watching who's facing something similar, elder abuse, financial exploitation, family betrayal, I want you to know, you are not helpless. There are people who will help you. Organizations like Adult Protective Services exist for exactly these situations. Lawyers who specialize in elder law can fight for your rights. And sometimes, strangers like Robert Shen will do the right thing just because it's right. Don't give up. Don't accept being victimized. Fight back. You deserve dignity. You deserve respect. You deserve to be treated as a person, not an inconvenience or an asset to be exploited. And your story matters. Your voice matters. Now I'd like to hear from you. Have you or someone you know experienced elder financial abuse? What would you do in my situation? Comment below and let me know what state you're watching from. Thank you for staying with me through this entire journey. Your support means everything. And remember, age is just a number. Courage has no expiration date.